As a scholar primarily occupied with interdisciplinarity and especially between the two cultures, I will unfold my argument from in discussing the art piece of Tino Sigrid from three different perspectives. So the first is the perspective of cultural history. There is seemingly unquestioned saying in cultural history that reads, "In the beginning there were images." And Tino Sigrid's choreographic performances object and even contradict this idea by the very way they discover an expressive language that precedes images, namely the expression of the corporeal gestures and the vocal gestures of the human body. And I think especially the aspect of voice is very important in his work. And this counts especially for the work we have seen yesterday afternoon. I guess it's yet untitled. I haven't got the title yet. Namely with its performance of a group of people, bodies, sitting on the ground and corresponding to each other, with modifying voices, gestures, and movements. The piece immediately evokes associations to ritual traditions and ritual traditions from different cultures. So reaching from, let's say, ape-like, primate-like movements via African or Indian trance-like rhythms and chants to artistic contortions of the limbs, reminding me to the corporeal figures of Tai Chi. And in the way the single persons mold and modify their bodily and vocal expressions and how they correspond to each other, at times all turning to one single person and at other times speaking or singing seemingly with one voice, this choreographic performance may be read as a simulation of the emergence of music and dance at all in cultural history, as a sort of primordial expressive art of mankind. And in the way it plays with harmonic and disharmonic interactions of the bodies and voices, the whole piece appears to me like a composition, a real composition of a polyphonic corporeal music. But in the same time, the artificial enactment makes clear that the audience is by no sense confronted with a sort of natural or so-called natural or archaic expressive language. Especially by means of several unnatural or even counternatural movements, it appears as an artificial production of a human expressive language that precedes the verbal language, as well as all genres of art in the strict and in the narrow sense of the concept of art. And I wrote down my thesis in order to have it in 10 minutes or 5 minutes. To connect this performative installation with art, I mean with the concept of art, reminds me to the concept of art in Michel de Certeau's Art de Faire from 1980. In this book, de Certeau analyzes the way of how the human bodies produce ephemeral traces and inscriptions within the space through their social activities and movements. However, these inscriptions can only be deciphered by virtual perspective from above, a bird's eye, or as de Certeau at that time could put it, from the World Trade Center, from the top of the World Trade Center. That is a position from which he distincts the perspective of the enacting bodies themselves, because they move in midst of their own cultural writing. And in my view, Tino Sigrid's pieces work on the threshold of being in midst and in the position of the visitor who tries to decipher the script of human culture. And the most productive aspect lies for me in the fluctuation of both perspectives. Second, the perspective of empathy or neuroscience. Tino Sigrid's way of working with interactive or intersubjective scenarios of bodies and voices is often called mimetic. And there was a nice situation yesterday when a little boy tried to join the group, and the mother always tried to get him away of that. But I also refer to the mimetic aspect of our experience yesterday evening in the Pisano Palazzo. This mimetic aspect may be connected to the mirror neuron mechanism, namely to concepts like embodied simulation by Vittorio, and to the renaissance of empathy in the wake of the reconceptualization of human interaction after the discovery of the mirror neurons. Actually, the mirror mechanism coincides with a 2,000-year-old leitmotif from the history of the concepts of fellow feeling, be it in the Greek version of eleos, pity, the Christian version of compassion, be it the idea of sympathy of moral philosophy, or the concept of Einfühlung in the psychological aesthetics around 1900. All these concepts share a core figure, namely viewing of the expressive gestures of others induce own feelings or emotions. They all are based in the combination of seeing and feeling, or seeing and acting. Tino Sehgal's piece, This Variation from the Documenta 2012, places the work with mimetic vocal and rhythmic expressive movements in a situation of darkness. This performance thus questions the role of the visual aspect within the mimetic culture fundamentally. It questions the role of viewing, of seeing other, both in the empathy paradigm and the mirror mechanism. As regards neuroscience, it evokes the question as to the function of a non-visual mimetic mechanism or a pre-visual embodied simulation. What do we know about a sort of embodied simulation preceding the mirror neurons? By now, the discussion is dominated by a mainly visual parameter. Perhaps it's time to shift the attention and ask for non-visual phenomena. And just one epilogue, the mimetic aspect, and this has to do with experience of art. The mimetic aspect of bodily movements in a group includes also an ambivalent aspect. And here I refer to Max Scheler's book on the character and form of sympathy from 1926, in which Max Scheler distinguishes Mitgefühl, feeling with, from Einsfühlung, which I find very important because he discusses different phenomena of Einsfühlung, feeling the same, or one body, many bodies feeling one body in politics and social life. And therefore, I think that there's also an uncanny aspect involved, especially in the work of variation, and therefore the transition between the position of the visitor and the position in midst is so important, so that the composition, the choreographic script for the whole, it's not just experience what happens, but it's so important that there's a script and visitors enter and go forth and back and change their position.
Thank you so much.